Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host Ken Bialo. Ken, who served for 4 years as mayor of the village of Larchmont, another 11 years as trustee on the Larchmont Village Board. How many years with the Recreation Committee, would you say?
I don't know, but...
Many. I mean, your life has been volunteer work.
Well, the village of Larchmont's a great place, or was a great place, and needs all the attention that it can get.
And you're back to...
But you're so modest, Marian. You haven't talked about your terms as trustee and your leadership of the Republican Party in the village of Larchmont, and your leadership of the Rotary Club.
Oh, yes, and I'm
also... You're just as guilty as I am.
And part of Pine Brook, which of course is a very special organization. So, and you're also still coaching young ladies softball, right?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to do it this year.
Oh, okay.
Kelsey is now playing on the, she just made the travel soccer team. So,
oh, congratulations.
Well,
I guess, I don't know, travel's a lot of work. Well, you coached my daughter. So,
I did.
Yes.
She was a great shortstop. First baseman. Outfielder.
She had a terrible glove, that's what you said. Anyway, you were a wonderful, she had a good time.
Well,
and,
so did I. Coaching is great stuff.
Well, you will be missed by the young ladies then.
I don't know.
I know that of course, we've had, Obama president for 2 weeks, and we're all expecting great changes. We're still waiting. And one of the issues that he is really pushing is his view of how to help the environment. And I know that's very important around here because we have some really wonderful assets such as Flint Park. And you and I have talked before about how it seemed that the environment, benefiting the environment was neglected because they knocked down so many trees. Other things like that.
Well, the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck working together were very early, must be back in the mid-'80s, perhaps late 80s. We're very early in the business of putting together a waterfront revitalization program.
Oh, right,
and that was Phyllis Whitner who was pushing that along, who's now a member of the town council, town of Mamaroneck Council. And by the way, just recently wasn't feeling well, so Phyllis, if you're watching, hope you feel better. So we were early in the process of taking advantage of the then new New York State law about waterfront revitalization programs, and it was a very detailed book, and we've made revisions to that from time to time as we've gone along. But I think the town has pushed hard for environmental improvements, and the village went along with it, and even later on sort of took on its own initiatives.
Right, you started an environmental committee.
Exactly right. When I was mayor,
that was very active.
We started an environmental committee, and we were basically looking at how to resolve problems like dry weather flow and other problems that were peculiar to the village. We also got a fair amount of money. I don't know whether the current board has actually used the money, but we got a fair amount of money. I want to say $300,000 or $400,000 maybe.
Don't you have to use something?
From the feds, yeah, well, don't ask.
Okay.
From the feds to install environmental improvements that were tributary to the Boston Post Road system, and in the village we had thought we were going to put in little whirligigs kind of things that were going to clean up the effluent going out to Long Island Sound, and we were going to put in some carbon absorption filters in the parking lots so as to take some of the runoff that comes out of automobile usage and clean that up before it went down to Long Island Sound. We had quite a bit of money. There was a good plan in place. I don't know whether the current people have actually followed through on that or not.
I don't think I've read anything about that.
I haven't read anything about that either. We bought a special truck that was designed to clean the storm drains.
Oh, okay, and I see that
more effectively.
goes around.
Yeah, it's a huge monster truck. It's kind of got a snout in the front and a snout in the back, and it goes around and it pulls garbage out of the storm drains. Yeah, we bought that. That was part of the grant. We also had some other grants pending with the Department of Transportation to do some other environmental cleanups, and I don't know what's happened to those. But what struck me as odd, I guess, was reported as an environmental summit that
Right.
apparently took place last week, reported in the Sound and Town report, in which apparently there were members of the village board and some members of the public who were talking about saving the world and saving the environment. But at the same time, it was the same village board that installed this crazy artificial turf field down in Flint Park, and in the process of doing that, knocked down, I don't know, 100 or more trees that were, I don't know, 100 years old, 60,
Right.
80, 100-foot trees.
Which is a huge negative
No.
impact on the environment.
Well, see, carbon dioxide goes into the air. Trees turn that around and make it into oxygen. You knock out a lot of trees,
Right.
you don't have as many guys making oxygen. And they did put in some little trees on the driveway sort of down
Yes.
into Flint Park, but those will not produce the same cleansing effect for, I don't know if they survive,
60
70,
years?
60 or 80 years. They also took up a whole huge area of the park that was grass
Yes.
and green things, and turned it into this artificial turf with some sort of a solid undercoating, and then there's the artificial turf they used was made of rubber crumbs, which there's a lot of science out there, certainly at the time that the village board was holding public hearings on this, which
Right,
they basically ignored.
Right, but people did
There were
raise the
people,
issue
yeah,
at
there were
that time.
scientists. There were scientists that had come down and said that these things actually release volatile organic compounds, and the operating temperatures of these fields is 130 to 150 degrees, and this isn't good for the kids, and it's terrible for the environment. You've taken a bunch of grass and replaced it with a bunch of tablecloth like
Well,
this,
then
or carpet.
don't the crumbs get spread around, and so that's bad for the grass?
Yeah, another issue is that the crumbs come off and they have to be raked back on, and you have to refill the crumbs, and when they run off of the field, the artificial turf field, they run where? Right into the
into the
adjacent
water.
East Creek, which runs into Long Island
Oh,
Sound. So
wow.
you're contributing to pollution of the sound with this sort of field as well. Of course, the whole point, I guess, was that this is a flooding area of Flint Park, and I know that they said that the village board said, oh, there are studies that show that this area of Flint Park doesn't flood, but that's baloney. All you had to do was go down there during the nor'easters a couple of
Right.
years ago, and the whole place was 4 feet deep in water. So the water comes in, it pushes those rubber crumbs all over the place, they get into the runoff, they get into Long Island Sound. So I guess it struck me as odd, as I said a minute ago, that this particular village board that had done so much to damage the environment in Flint Park
Right.
was holding an environmental summit in which apparently the current mayor was quoted as saying, Larchmont Board of Trustees is committed to doing what we can to protect the environment. I guess my question is, how come you haven't done that before? This is new, you just
I
woke
see,
up?
now they're
Yeah,
committed.
you just woke up? Hello, where you been? So, to me, it's kind of more words and again, kind of no substance, which has been my view of this particular village board for the last several years.
Well, I know I heard someone told me that actually this board had been thinking that they would just go to one public meeting a month.
Yeah, I heard the same thing.
And then what? And then they would have a work session or something. But anyway, to cut back to one meeting, I don't know how they can get all their business done by doing that, because they're supposed to do business in the public eye. There are only certain times when you can go and talk confidentially or privately.
Right.
Otherwise, it's supposed to be transparent, and so people can see what's going on.
Well, when you and I started in 1991,
Yes,
most
wasn't
people
that a
around
long
here
time?
weren't born on the village board. There were two meetings a month, two public meetings a month.
Right.
And at the end of the meeting, there was a time where people who wanted to be heard, members of the public who didn't have an agenda item,
Right.
could come up and speak. There was no TV. We weren't covered
Right.
by LMC-TV. We just sat there, and whoever showed up, showed up. And
Well,
whoever
and
didn't,
Dick
didn't.
Murphy often was the one person there.
God bless him, he was there.
And, and he wanted those bathrooms at the train station, and
That's
I
what
think
we
of
got.
him every time I'm at the train station.
Well,
It's really wonderful.
Okay, well, you probably use the bathroom at home before you go there. But anyway, so we had two meetings a month, and then we had scattered work sessions, particularly for budget preparation.
my.
In,
It's a
when we
lot of
had
work
in,
then,
in
yes.
February and March. And I guess when I was mayor, we expanded the public access. We had those Saturday morning
Yes,
office hours.
those public, right,
And
I remember.
The basic idea was open and candid
Right.
and responsive, and so we opened it up. We had
Well, and especially on the weekend, so that people that work
Yes.
would be able to actually
Exactly
come.
right. And we took the people who wanted to be heard but who weren't on the agenda from the back end of the agenda, the 11 o'clock end of the agenda, and moved it up to item number 3 so that that would come on at 8 or 8:30, depending
Right.
on the meeting. And we had work sessions on budget reviews in the middle of the year so that we could kind of monitor what was going on. All of which is not done on television, but was, newspaper reporters were welcome to attend and just listen.
Well, and the
as we
public
went
was,
through the
I mean, it
numbers.
was open.
It was open. So I thought we made some strides in the right direction. We also voted a board rule that Larchmont notes wouldn't be sent out during the election season
Oh, right.
because what it used to amount to was the public basically funding somebody's campaign for re-election. So, we tried to clean it up a little bit and to open it up. And the idea, I guess, after this group came in, they moved the people who want to be heard back to the back end of the agenda. I don't know whether it stayed there or not. And the newsletters are much less informative, although I have to say nobody's violated that rule of
Oh, well, that's good.
pushing out Larchmont notes and during election season. Of course, there haven't been much by way of contested elections. But the idea of moving all the way back to, they eliminated the Saturday morning meetings, and now moving back to one public meeting a month, just
Well,
struck me
especially
again
at-
as kind of odd. I mean, you're moving in the wrong direction. You want to be open and candid and responsive, which is what I thought I was aimed at. And instead we had the whole process now being hidden even more than it had been by these people behind the curtains, which to me doesn't make any
Well,
sense.
and I thought that, they're always busy doing things, so how could you possibly accomplish the business of the village, one night a month? I think that would just be impossible.
Well, you could have show meetings instead of meetings that had substance.
Oh, okay. Well, you're right. We
Right?
we had lots
Let's
of
vote on this.
debates.
Let's vote on this.
Well, of
Let's
course,
vote on
we
this.
had divided boards, so that's why we had good debates.
Yes, and this board is not divided, so they can do anything behind the scenes and then come out in front and just have a little show item. Let's vote on this. And they can vote. You can do 20 or 30
Well,
items.
it's very efficient, isn't it? It might be.
Dictatorship is efficient. Somebody said that.
You mentioned in this how so much time was spent during tax season, and here we are for the villages
Yeah.
starting the tax season. And so what are you expecting?
Well, it's hard to know with this group what to expect. I mean, it really is. You would have thought that when the county was preparing its budget in the fall, that instead of ending up with a tax warrant increase of 1.8%, you would have thought that in the circumstances that prevailed in late September, with Lehman going out and
Oh,
the
yeah.
catastrophe that was October and the beginning part of November, you would have thought that the county would have been more circumspect in what it is they wanted to put out as a budget, i.e., that is, instead of saying we should spend more money, you would have thought that they would say, let's pull back, maybe even have a tax reduction so that
Yes.
people have more money in their pockets to spend on other things that will stimulate the economy. Government
Right.
spending is not, and I know there's this huge debate in Congress and the Senate passed the bill yesterday, government spending is great and it's
But it's not.
yeah, no, but it's not. And everybody who was not an armchair economist or didn't learn everything that they ever knew about economics from the New York Times or from political speeches, everybody who actually studied economics, you're a master of business, and my undergrad degree was in economics. I mean, everybody, you understand that government dollars supplant private dollars. They don't add to private dollars. It's a very rare instance where it's additive, and so you get some benefit, you get some punch out of
Right.
it. Well, the county of Westchester has got no punch at all, right?
Right.
They're basically, they turned themselves from a caretaker government into a programmatic government. Now they got a $2 billion budget or $1.8 billion in budget.
That's just amazing.
Absolutely nutty
Yes.
that they do this. But what I was thinking was in November when they were proposing their budget, they'd pull back And they'd say,
Well, and
no
wasn't
tax
there an
increase.
example of some entity around here that did?
Yeah, there was a couple of towns
Right.
that had their budget in the same cycle. But instead of the county doing that, they asked for a tax increase. And I'm sitting here looking at the Village of Larchmont tax discussion, the budget discussion season upon us.
Yes.
It's February. The preliminary's got to be presented March 10th, or the tentative, and then the preliminary is presented the next month in April or the end of March, I've forgotten. March 20th and April 10th, or dates of that sort. They're gearing up now for this.
Right.
And I don't see anything in the newspapers where the people who are heading the village board or on the village board are saying, boy, are we concerned there are a lot of people out of work. And this is a good time for us to look at our out-of-hand budget. They've had tax increases, I don't know, averaging 4 or 5% over the last couple of years. And say to us, the voters and the residents, say, you know what, we're not going to have a tax increase this year. We're going to have a tax reduction. I don't see any discussion of that.
Well, what I really loved was before the mayor ran for the state senate, the increase in village taxes last year was 4.99%, I believe.
Yes.
And then her campaign platform was
4%.
Yeah, that it would
4%
not
cap.
go more than 4. So I didn't understand that one at all. I guess it was a new leaf.
Well, I'd like to see a new leaf now.
Yes.
But instead of seeing a leaf that says a 4% tax cap, which is what she campaigned and
Right.
Was soundly and roundly defeated on, I would like to see somebody on the village board, anybody, any one of those people, stand up and say, you know what? We have so many people out of work in the village. We are such an expensive place to live. We're going to give everybody a breather. We're going to hold our tax to zero increase, or we're going to reduce it. That would be an absolutely startling innovation. We're going to reduce it.
Well,
And if that means some reduction in services, or it means that people only work 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week, which is what they're going to do in California to try and meet their budget concerns, you know what? These are tough times. I don't know how many people you know who are out of work. I must know, we must know, Kate and I, 10 or 15 people who were employed as of last February and aren't employed now.
Well, and the problem is that these layoffs are going to continue for another 6 months. I mean, heavy-duty layoffs.
In the financial sector.
Yeah, well, in everything, because it's it's a cascade effect.
Right.
So, you know 15 now, but it's still going to be growing. So in June you can know 40.
Yeah, no, I don't
it's
think it's not a scientific sample. I'm not saying they're only 15.
No, but I'm just saying we're just in the sort of the early stages. We still have a lot to go in terms of the unemployment rising before they
Right,
think it
good
will
point.
cap out.
Yes.
So this isn't the measurement.
Good.
Period.
That's a fair point. And of course, the budget discussions in the village now and the budget that gets passed by April 30th as required by law doesn't result in a tax warrant going out. That is, mayor
Yeah.
signs the warrant, says to the controller, go collect this money, we need it. That doesn't happen. The bills don't come out till June 1, which may be, if 2009 is a good
yeah.
year, that might be the peak.
Of
Of
the
unemployment.
newly unemployed.
Yes. I mean, if this is a good year, if it's
Yeah,
a
it's
bad year like October and September of 2008, I don't know what you wind up with in June. But I guess what concerns me is I don't hear anybody saying no tax increase, or better yet, tax reduction. I don't see that anywhere in the newspapers. I don't see any of these people who are
And
at
everyone's
the environmental
you
summit,
know,
which,
I mean,
talking about what really
The
matters.
state is increasing taxes, the county is increasing taxes, everyone is. It's just
Well, I think the
ridiculous.
governor's between a rock and a hard place. When he first took over, he said, and the state controller agreed with him in the spring, he said, we're looking at almost $2 billion deficit
Yes.
for this year. And he brought the legislators back for a stump session in the fall saying, we've got to solve this problem. And they didn't solve the problem. And so then the controller started looking out and said, well, look, we've got a $14 billion deficit next year. And now the legislature's in session, and the governor started the arrangements here for this negotiation by saying, look, we can't afford what we used to afford. We have got to make significant cutbacks in education, which is a huge portion of the bill, and in health care, which New York State has
Right,
benefits in Medicaid that other places only dream about.
right.
And so that was a pretty realistic view. And every time you pick up the newspapers, you'd see something that says, unions balk at taking a cut, or unions insist they will not be cut. And you listen to the advertisements on the radio, and that this union says, we can't be cut, we're too important. And another union says, we're too
Well, because it
important.
will hurt the kids.
Yeah,
Everything will hurt the kids.
Everything is going to
Yeah.
hurt somebody. Well, the answer is, this is time for shared sacrifice, because if we have a $14 billion budget gap, there is no way that that can be closed. No way it can't be closed by a millionaire's tax, and Shelley Silver, the Speaker of the Assembly's idea, a millionaire's tax, which today I heard was being reduced from millionaires to thousandaires.
Right.
And there's no way that you can increase taxes and have a recovery in this state at the same time that other people are saying, no, you need to decrease taxes so there's more
Right.
money in people's pockets so that we can stimulate a consumer-driven recovery. You can't do this.
I know I was not at the last show, and I understood that you had, Jim Sweeney was the guest, and you were talking about a very tangible ways that the village could save money.
Well, we were. And Jim was a great guest. We had a really interesting show.
Well, I understand it was fancy. You had
graphics and all kinds of other fancy doodads. Jim was a great guest. Jim was a former fire chief in the village. I think he was fire chief in the when we used to have volunteers and a volunteer chief.
Yes.
In the village of Larchmont in 91, 92, and then maybe again in the early 2000s. His basic point was, and this was a presentation that had been made by Ned Benton to the village board, I think a night or two before our TV program.
Oh, okay. So this
So
is
sort
all
of picking
very
it up,
recent.
picking it up, and this had to be in the last month. Jim said, and Ned had done a lot of analysis, and Jim had talked about it with Ned, and I talked about it with them a little bit. That if you went to a volunteer fire service, which I don't think can be reestablished in the village of Larchmont at this stage in the game.
Right.
But if you consolidated fire districts or the fire service of Larchmont Village and the town of Mamaroneck,
Right.
that if you conceived of a 3-year phase-in of some sort of consolidation, irrespective of what the name is, merger, consolidate, whatever, that the numbers suggested that you could get a 5% savings in 1 year and another 5% in the second year.
5% on what?
On the, I believe it was on the tax warrant for the village of Larchmont.
So my taxes could go down by 5%
Yes.
in year one?
Yes.
Down then another 5, or a total of 10% year 2, and actually down 15% in year 3.
By the time you get to year 3. Assuming all these assumptions
Yeah,
fit and,
right.
and you know the numbers worked out. What struck me about that, and I would have thought that it would strike anybody who is a resident in the village, is first of all, nobody, not this village board especially, has a program for reducing taxes. Here is a way of thinking about
Right.
how something can be achieved structurally that is a lasting change, not one of these, oh, we'll throw this item out this year, but guess what, it sneaks in the back door next year.
Right.
And take advantage of volunteer fire services, which right now in the town of Mamaroneck, they're chock full of volunteers, because most of the Larchmont volunteers went to the town of Mamaroneck when the mayor appointed
So
a
if
paid
we were
chief in Larchmont.
merged, then they would actually come back and be Larchmont volunteers, because we would all be one district.
That's the theory. That's the theory. And again, it has to strike you as sort of odd. Nobody on this village board, so far as I'm aware, certainly not in the newspaper, has talked about this idea, has talked about this prospect, has talked about the presentation that Ned Benton made with the numbers, and he had a whole package, as I understand it, that he handed out. Why isn't this being investigated? Well, I mean, the answer may be that it has more to do with the politics in the village of Larchmont and the paid firefighters than it does with the reality of serving the village and helping to find a structural way to reduce the tax burden.
But trustees have said that they are looking at ways to merge services. I mean, that was, some big statement at the end of the year, I guess.
Empty.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you'd think that someone would, we already share so many services, there really aren't a lot of things left to do together.
Police and fire.
And everything else.
We share sanitation, we share library, we share senior center. We used to share controllers, but the Larchmont Village Board decided they wanted to steal the town's controller and double what the village paid for controller services as opposed to what they used to have in the past. We have LMC-TV, the cable station, which broadcasts this show, cablecasts this show, which is a shared entity between the Village of Mamaroneck, the Village of Larchmont, and the town of Mamaroneck. There's lots of sharing that's gone on. DPW is not shared. And fire is
worked really hard. I mean, because they do so many different things, there's just always stuff they have to be doing.
I agree. And I thought that they, when I was mayor, and I still think that they do a great job.
Yes.
And I'm not saying the cops and the fire guys don't do a good job. I'm just pointing out that the big nut, $2 million for fire services, $3.5 or $4 million by the time you throw in pensions and health insurance. For the cops, those are big nuts.
Right.
That together probably total up maybe 50 or 60% of the village's tax bill. So if you're looking for a big structural savings, that's a place to look. Well, people are going to say, oh my God, the services in the village of Larchmont are going to go downhill. We won't have any fire protection. I mean, the reality is, people, we have a couple of working fires a year. Some years we have none. If you're able to take advantage of having the town of Mamaroneck service respond, and instead of sitting on the apron at Village Hall waiting for somebody to say, please get involved, responding to the fire, you've got, I don't know, 70 or 100 volunteers
right
there.
In the area.
Yeah,
yes.
who can do what volunteer firemen are supposed to do. Firemen don't have an everyday job in the sense that there isn't a fire every day or lots of fires every day in the suburbs. It's not the way it works. You're better off having this sort of expandable force that's volunteer than you are having, pretending to have a lot of paid staff. In New Rochelle, it's different. New Rochelle, city of 75,000 people, they do have a paid staff.
Oh, so, and they would maybe have a fire once a week.
I don't know, but it makes sense to me that when you exceed a certain population level, you're going to need more available service than having volunteers, some of whom are in town, some of whom aren't in town, to respond. Same is true in Mount Vernon.
Well, didn't you tell me that actually there would still be some presence in the village?
Yeah, what I think Jim was talking about, and all of this is subject to being worked out. It depends on what your objectives are. If you accept the idea there should be some sort of consolidation and you start to study it, you have the question of what did we do with the fire trucks in the village of Larchmont, and what did we do with the fact that they're housed in the village hall? Answer, station somebody there. Maybe it's two somebodies there who are capable of responding locally, and I would include in that the Dillon Road sector of the town for which there is no now current response. You have to go all the way
and
from
so
Weaver
you would
Street.
have the same response time. It would still be.
You should have a first responder.
There would be some equipment in the village that would be able to respond quickly.
Again,
like now.
That's what Jim was talking about, and it depends on how you configure the thing. But it sounds like it's doable, and if the numbers are real, 5%, 10%, cumulative 15%, I think it's something that needs to be looked at.
That's very persuasive. Yeah. Well, I know we'll have lots to talk about. Time's up now, but it is tax season, so I'm sure maybe we can have some graphics on numbers. Those are always so good to put people to sleep.
Well, everybody out there, remember that you should be asking your village board for 0 tax increase, or as I said, better yet, a tax reduction.
Well,
make them think about it, make them do it.
Thank you very much, LMC-TV, for your help every time we do our show.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
See you next time.